Hi and welcome back. Red light therapy, also known as photobiomodulation, has become hugely popular as an at-home modality for skin rejuvenation in recent years. And if you've been here for a little while, you know I love my red light therapy. However, recently there seems to be some debate brewing on YouTube around the possibility of red light therapy causing facial fat loss. This idea stems from information around the well-documented application of photobiomodulation to reduce adipose tissue mass in obese and diabetic individuals. To look at the evidence behind this idea and assess the risk of red light therapy for facial fat loss, I invited my dear friend Bev Sanderson back. And Bev Sanderson, as most of you know, is the owner of Maysama, a skincare brand formulated with green rooibos extract, which has been proven to amplify the effects of red light therapy for skin rejuvenation. Bev's understanding of red light therapy is exceptional. So I'm hoping she can help us answer the question, can red light therapy cause facial fat loss? Thank you so much for being with us, Bev.
Oh, it's so lovely to be back. Thank you, Claudia.
It's always awesome to have you on the channel. Now, Bev, maybe you can start by telling us what adipose tissue is and what its function is.
Yes, of course. The function of adipose tissue is energy storage in the form of lipid. So in healthy individuals, insulin helps us uptake glucose to the adipose tissue, and then it's transformed into lipid, which is a more stable energy molecule. And then adipocytes, our fat cells, gradually release those free fatty acids when the body needs it for energy.
So you mentioned what happens in healthy individuals. What happens in unhealthy individuals?
Well, in obesity, for example, adipocytes become dysfunctional in two ways. We get hyperplasia, which is an overproduction of cells, and we get hypertrophy, which is oversized cells. So hypertrophic adipocytes or oversized cells then lead to inflammation and insulin resistance. And these hypertrophic cells release free fatty acids and pro-inflammatory cytokines, and that's what leads to a reduction in insulin sensitivity. And they also release more free radicals. So we've got the potential to do damage to DNA and interrupt cellular signaling. So it's not a pretty picture overall. So there's a very different physiology between healthy cells and unhealthy adipocyte cells. And interestingly, fatty tissue, whilst it's not responsible for all of the body's glucose uptake, when we get dysfunctional fatty tissue, it can lead to whole body insulin resistance and the progression to type 2 diabetes.
You mentioned that this sort of dysfunctional fat metabolism can lead to diabetes and insulin resistance. Could red light therapy be used to treat these conditions and cause fat loss?
Yes, there is evidence to support that. There are studies that support that red light therapy has lipolytic activity and can be used to reduce fat and help body contouring in obese and diabetic individuals. So there's a study by Gong in 2019, for example, which takes a mouse model of type 2 diabetes, and it shows that photobiomodulation, which is red light therapy, helps to reduce the release of free fatty acids, and then that improves or reduces resistance to insulin. So that's one study. In fact, he went on to do another study with skeletal tissue, and it showed that it had the same response, that it reduced or improved sensitivity to insulin. So that shows that photobiomodulation helps to improve abnormalities, metabolic abnormalities, and restore cells to their normal health. And there's a study by Moderna as well in 2022, which is an in vivo study. So the difference being in vitro, which were the Gong studies, are in a controlled environment. And then an in vivo study is done in living organisms. So in this case, with Moderna, it's using obese individuals and using photobiomodulation to reduce fat. And it did confirm again that it has lipolytic activity.
So if studies suggest that red light therapy can achieve fat loss in obese individuals, wouldn't it be realistic to propose that it can also do so in healthy individuals and possibly in places where we don't want to lose fat, such as the face?
Well, it's a great question, but the answer is actually no. That's an oversimplified rationale. I mean, there's over 6,000 papers on red light therapy and less than 20 on photobiomodulation-driven fat loss. And both myself and my partners, our research partners at the Nelson Mandela Research Institute, have reviewed all of the papers on red light therapy with fat loss. And there's no convincing or direct scientific data that suggests that red light therapy would deplete fat in the face. All the papers, all the published papers, relate to photobiomodulation-driven fat loss in obese and diabetic individuals. So its effect is on unhealthy cells, and data supports that healthy cells are unaffected.
So Bev, you just mentioned that healthy cells are not negatively affected by red light therapy. What is the evidence?
Well, if we look at the paper by McCulloch in 2021, this is an in vitro study on hypertrophic adipocyte cells, so unhealthy fat cells. And this one is using near infrared light, 1035 nanometer. And it shows that the photobiomodulation helps to reduce lipids and restore these cells to normal adipocyte function. So it's restoring the health, the morphology, and the function of these cells. It doesn't, once the cells are healthy, those cells don't lose further fat. It's simply restoring the health of those cells. So that's direct evidence that healthy cells would be unaffected. And probably the most compelling evidence is a study by Cellular in 2019, this is an in vivo study. So it's on obese mice. And in this study, he's got two groups. He's got a high-fat diet group and a low-fat diet group. So the low-fat diet group really it's a control, and those are healthy individuals, if you like. And this is probably going to give us the best evidence of what we could expect from photobiomodulation with healthy cells. So with a high-fat diet group, when we introduce photobiomodulation, what we see is a reduction in the tissue mass of fatty tissue, and a reduction in body weight, and an improvement in insulin resistance. In the low-fat diet group, though, interestingly, there is no change to tissue mass and body weight. So that is direct evidence that healthy cells are resistant to photobiomodulation-driven fat loss.
That is really interesting. And it just shows you, when looking at a study, you can't just look at the headline. We have to actually read the study. And I think that's where the panic oftentimes comes from. People look at the headline of a study and jump to conclusions rather than reading the whole study.
That is so, so true.
So if red light therapy can affect unhealthy cells, how does it distinguish between healthy and unhealthy cells?
Well, the body's constantly striving to maintain a state of balance, regardless of all external stimuli that try and disrupt it. And this process is called homeostasis. So we have homeostasis for blood sugar, blood pressure, hormones, temperature. Constantly, our body is adjusting those to maintain a state of balance so that it's normal as we know it. And homeostasis also affects cells and tissues. So adipose tissue homeostasis means that adipocyte cells constantly regulate how much fat they accumulate and how much fat they also lose. So whilst they resist excessive fat accumulation, and we spoke about that in an earlier video, they also resist excessive fat loss. So aligned with adipose tissue homeostasis, photobiomodulation does not affect fat loss in healthy cells. And as we've already discussed, under conditions of obesity, adipose tissue becomes dysfunctional, and dysfunctional tissue has a different physiological function and form. And indirect evidence suggests that these differences in function and form of these unhealthy cells allows it to be selectively targeted by photobiomodulation. So there's a threshold for the efficacy of photobiomodulation driven fat loss. And this is not unusual in biological systems. And we've seen before that green tea can selectively target precancerous cells, for example. So it's not unusual. So in the instance of red light therapy, it can distinguish between a healthy cell and an unhealthy cell based on function and form.
Okay, so that made a lot of sense. Thank you so much for explaining that. And I like your example of the green tea. And of course, there are many other targeted treatments in medicine. So it does make a lot of sense what you said. So just to make sure we understand it correctly, red light therapy can only cause fat loss in unhealthy or obese cells, not in healthy cells. Is that correct?
Yes, that is what the studies support. The studies support that it is about restoring cell health. That is what the modality of photobiomodulation does, restores cell health. It's not about destroying fat, it's about restoring cell health. So if we look at, in all the studies we've seen, the fat loss is only in studies that relate to obesity and diabetic individuals. Where we have healthy cells, we have not seen them lose further tissue mass or body weight. That's quite conclusive. So it looks like the mechanism of photobiomodulation driven fat loss depends on restoration of cell health and proper lipid metabolism. So we've got reduction in cell hypertrophy. We've got improvement in uptake of glucose, improvement in insulin resistance. All these things indicate that it's restoring health. And I think that is the key message to take away from this video. That is the function of photobiomodulation, to restore cell health.
Well, that is fantastic news because, I love my red light therapy and I know you do as well. Now, on another note, you and I previously discussed in a different video that rooibos can potentially play a role in the protection and repair of pre-adipocytes or fat stem cells. Do you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, I think it's relevant to what we're talking about. So the NMI, Nelson Mandela Institute in South Africa, shared a paper with me that they performed on pre-adipocytes, which are fat stem cells, and using a spalathine-enriched green rooibos extract. That ingredient helped to protect and repair the health of these fat stem cells. And what came out of that study was that the reason for it was due to an increase or an improvement in mitochondrial health. Now, it's the spalathine that affects the mitochondria because it improves mitochondrial respiration. It helps we should explain what mitochondria are. It's the batteries of the cells which produce cellular energy. And spalathine, which is one of the main flavonoids in green rooibos, helps the mitochondria to uptake glucose, which is their food source, more effectively. So it improves the mitochondria bioenergetics. Now, as you already know, a spalathine-enriched green rooibos extract is a hero ingredient in Maysama skincare. It's also used in the pharmaceutical industry to treat diabetes on account of its blood sugar lowering properties. And when we shared our results, because we talked before about Maysama's green rooibos pressed serum and how we now have data to show that it effectively amplifies and accelerates the effects of red light therapy. So it's proven to do that. When we shared that data with Dr. Hamblin, who's the leading photobiomodulation scientist, he attributed our results to a biochemical reaction. And again, it relates to a spalathine improving the rate of mitochondrial respiration. So we get more ATP and we get cell proliferation, cell migration, all those things. And when we're looking at anti-aging, of course, that relates to fibroblasts producing more collagen. But when we relate it to fat stem cells, it's keeping them healthy because mitochondria are in every cell. So if you can improve the health of the mitochondria, you are improving the health of the cell. So I just thought that was a great takeaway for anyone already using Maysama green rooibos pressed serum to accelerate and amplify results for red light therapy. whilst we haven't done claims testing on fat protection, I hope it's a little bit more reassurance to them that potentially it could help protect and repair that subcutaneous fat layer as well.
That is fascinating, and it is a subject for a whole nother video. You have to promise me to make that one with me. Because that does sound fascinating, because we were assuming that it was just because of the antioxidant properties.
Exactly.
So,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, which plays a part. But actually, when I had a Zoom call with Dr. Hamblin, he said so many things are labeled as antioxidants, Bev, and more often than not, the antioxidant behavior or capacity of that particular ingredient is not the main reason. And then within 10 minutes, he went, bing, popped this paper over to me and said, this is the reason. It's the aspalathin. Because there's studies around aspalathin and diabetes and how it helps the mitochondria. And he said, this is the reason. It's a biochemical reaction.
That's fascinating. Will you make that video with me? That will be a whole nother video. Great. Well, Beth, as always, this was so informative, and I'm just so grateful for you coming on the channel. Is there anything else you would like to add?
I think we covered it all, Cloudy, but thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to that next video.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Thank you so much for being Beth. Thank you.
I love being Beth.
Can't talk today. Wow. So if the literature suggests that's tough. That's a blah, blah, blah.